Okay, these are the critiques of the information speech for COMM 101-83N. A couple of points. Number one, you've got to pay attention to what I say in these critiques because many of the errors are being repeated and it is now costing you points on your speeches. Number two, nothing in this class, paperwork-wise, is to be submitted other than to me at my Ivy Tech email address from your Ivy Tech email address. I've said that a number of times, and I still find people posting papers someplace else. You cannot do that. You must read the directions on the speech. If it requires a visual, you're supposed to send me a copy of the visual so that I can look at it. If it's a PowerPoint, send me the address of the PowerPoint or the PowerPoint so I can look at it and see what it is doing. Again, you leave points on the table when you omit those kinds of steps. Another thing, establish your credibility at the very beginning of the speech. Key point. If you don't know what that is, check it out in the book, but also you can call me and I can explain it to you. Another point, sources. Your last speech required 3 sources. You must cite the sources in the speech itself, not just a bibliography. So when you're up there and you're saying that 400 people were killed last week, you better say where, how, where you got that information. You'll hear some things in this speech critique where people didn't do that. Please, please, please read the directions. Also, the length of the speech. It's very carefully spelled out. You must make sure you get that right. Also, just in case you see a discrepancy, in the syllabus, it said that the information speech is worth 200 points, the persuasive speech is worth 300 points. That is true. I think I've seen a couple of places, or at least one place, maybe even in the grade book, where it indicated that it was only worth 100 points. It's worth 200 points. You have 740 points on your speeches. Your information speech is 100 points. Your process speech was 100 points. Your information speech is 200 points. Your persuasive speech is 300 points. And then the rest of the speeches come out to the rest of those points. All right, let's get started. We'll start with Skeet. And Skeet, you talked about Volcano Thera, and you read your speech. That is totally unacceptable. If you have to clear your throat, excuse me, is how you do that. You say something. You don't just and ignore it. All right? You're reading your dramatic opening, which makes it even worse, and I can see the edge of the speech, and you're moving around, and it's a wonderful opening, but you're reading it. You just lose all impact when you do that. Don't do that. And there were times when you seemed to get lost in your own speech, there's a couple of points in there about eye contact, which you got killed on because you were reading too much. Use your pauses effectively. You didn't. There were some awkward pauses in the speech. You did do a really good job on getting the visual aid presented. I'm not sure that it was a great visual aid, but at least you presented it well. You cited your sources clearly in your outline, but you make sure you cite them in the actual speech. Next up is nature. Nature, you spoke about chiropractors, and you had a good use of visuals. You still have the wrong camera shot. You have a window to your left and something to your right, both with light coming in, which is affecting your iris, which is causing some problems with the camera shot. Also, you had several awkward pauses, no flow. You've got to get from one point to another, and you seem to get lost in your own speech. Next up is Cosmo. Cosmo, you spoke about cells, and you still are using the wrong camera shot. You had a good visual integration of your visuals into the speech. Work on the flow, and don't play with your hair while you're speaking. Don't be brushing it back or doing anything with that. The camera was in soft focus most of the time, making it very difficult to see you. Tell me at the outset of your speech why I should care about this topic. A lot of you need to make sure. Some of you were doing college lectures, and it's like, okay, who's your audience? What do you think their interest level is in this? And make sure that you explain all of that. This is one of those that came off as a classroom lecture, not a conversation. You used lots of technical terms, and you can't do that in a general audience speech. Next up is Sadie Mae. You spoke about obesity. You had a good appearance. You start very strong. Make sure you do that. Watch your vocalized pauses. You're shooting up in the shot. Don't do that. And you still need to have a closer shot to you. You cited no sources in your outlines. Don't play with your hair while you're speaking. And you had questionable citing of sources for blacks being more accepting of being overweight. You want to be really, really careful when you say something like that, and make sure that your source is impeccable. And it also would probably be a good idea to have more than one source when you're talking about racial kinds of things. Stand still when you speak. You had an interesting information. Watch your source citations. Next up is Pasta. Pasta spoke about the NFL. You had situations where it was very hard to see your eyes. You need more energy. Basically, the eyes thing was because there wasn't a lot of light. You had a very dark video. You said something about you go to college games on Sunday. I'm not too familiar with very many colleges that play on Sunday. You appear to be reading far too much. Pick up your pace a little bit. Don't go so slowly. Add a good dose of energy to what you're doing and some vocal variety. So you're up here sometimes and you're down here sometimes, and you go fast sometimes and you go slow sometimes. All right? You are too formal. You say things like, let us move on to fantasy football. Conversationally, you probably do not say, let us move on to fantasy football. You probably say, let's take a look at fantasy football. Let's move to fantasy football. You get that contraction in there, so be conversational. It sounded like you turned your camera off after the audience intro. That's a no-no. You must start your camera and keep it running throughout, and you were short on the length of your speech. Next up is the speaker spoke on fibromyalgia, and hang on just a second and let me see if I can get the fantasy name, because I didn't do that. This is Waffles, and Waffles spoke about fibromyalgia, and let me tell you some of the things that were done there, and I'll get the camera shot back and I can see what's going on. You have very pleasant facial expression. That's good. You had a good visual. You had a good speech, well written and presented. You were conversational. You were technical, but not too technical. And this was an exceptionally well done speech. So nice job on that one, Waffles. Next up is Pokey. And Pokey spoke about the Trojan War. And I have notations here about sources cited. Very hard to tell. Your video stopped mid-sentence at 5 minutes and 50 seconds in. You are reading your speech. That makes poor eye contact. You probably more often than not were like this when you were speaking, and that's not acceptable at all. You can see what's happening here because I'm looking down, not looking at you. You need to show your visual longer. It was on for too short a time. This is not a conversational speech. It's a college lecture. It was hard to understand many of the names and terms. It was far too complicated and technical, and you need to watch your pace. At times it was too fast. And see how boring that was when I'm looking down all of that time? You can't do that. And I have to read some of this, but in your speech, you have a preparation outline and a speaking outline. You need to use the speaking outline so that it's not giving you word for word. You're not bound to it. You can look down, pick up what you need to say next, and go to it. Next up is morning. You talked about formatting. Wow. Your speech went 12 minutes and 35 seconds. That's way too long. You have good picture, video, and audio, but it was far too long. You need to establish your credibility. With you, this time of year, we all have that kind of cold thing, and you have this kind of stuff. You want to be careful of that, and that's the thing where you may want to say, excuse me, when you're doing it, but not just ignore as you're speaking that you're doing that a lot. If you're reading you are reading your speech too much, it sounds again like a college lecture, or even better yet, the Microsoft company sales pitch for how to format using Microsoft. I could just see it as a pre-packaged PowerPoint lecture, so be careful of that. You need to bring more energy, and you need to cite your sources in your speech. Next up is Colt. You spoke about financial aid. Stand still when you speak. You have the wrong camera shot. You're also shooting up into your face. Cite your sources in your speech as you give it. Slow down a bit. Establish your credibility clearly from the very beginning. Make sure it's understandable. You did give a speech with good information and an important speech, but you said something and you didn't cite a source. You said it cost $11,692 a year for Ivy Tech. I kind of ran the full-time student, the tuition. I didn't throw in books, but it's nowhere near $11,692 a year. So it would have been helpful if you would have cited a source on that. Also, Ivy Tech cites itself as being an affordable college. You want to make sure that if you're going against that, that you cite it carefully with the sources. Watch the vocalized pauses, the ums and the ahs and things like that. Next up is Napkin. Napkin talked about Terracotta Warriors, and your video just stopped mid-sentence. You have a very pleasant facial expression. You're the kind of person that other people want to listen to. Your outline was not formatted properly. Please use a 12-point Arial type when you do that. And listen, I have said this before, and you missed it big time. Unless you have an ADA reason, and I need to have a copy of that reason, never, but never, but never sit while you're speaking. You'll hardly, I don't know, I've ever seen a public speaker who was not handicapped in some way, that they did not stand while giving a speech. It gives you better breath support, all kinds. I won't even go into the details. All right, you are reading your speech. It's over there somewhere, and I can see your eyes even moving along as you do it. Do not read your speech. Cite your sources in your speech. Your speech ended mid-sentence abruptly at 4 minutes and 56 seconds in. What was your visual, I said, and then you held up a book. I don't know how you did it, but the book was backwards. It was like I was looking at the book in a mirror. The title was backwards. You may have done something on your camera where it's reversing the video. I have no idea, but it was a backwards picture. Okay, that's it. I will be posting your grades. Actually, not posting them. I will be sending you a Excel spreadsheet showing what your latest grades are with your speeches, those of you, not speeches, your exams, those of you who have done them, and also your latest discussion board grades. All right, have a good weekend, and it's going fast. It's almost over. 16 weeks worth of work in 8 weeks is not easy, and I appreciate that. So please pay attention to what I say in these videos and make it happen, okay? Have a great one.